Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another video in the series on the Charter of Triunnia Genesis Codex. In this video, we look at the next batch of recognitions: classes, types of governments, basis of society, and law. We will see how classes derive from types of thinking and that the dominant thinking type determines the type of government. We'll also look at the basic structure of societies and show how the sovereign and the citizens collude together to further the aims of their society. Finally, we'll look at how we understand law to be, which is another important recognition for building a truly free and prosperous society for all. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our series. Today, we're starting off with classes. There are actually classes based on how people think. We recognize that in the Genesis Codex. 1581 is recognition of classes. By their thinking, the population self-selects into four primary classes: laborers, traders, thinkers, and knowers. And again, this is stated by Percival, and we are recognizing it in the Codex. So laborers are those who predominantly act as hired labor or slaves, or those who pool their labor with others to accomplish larger communal goals. These are more commonly known as the working class, or contractors or employees, and sometimes owners of small mom and pop shops are also considered laborers. Blue collar workers. If you get by in this world by selling your labor, you are a laborer. And that's predominantly a style of thinking. It's how you think about the world. And it's actually the lowest thinking class. It's the most common, but it's also at the bottom. It's the most to the ground, physical thinking class. And all it means is that it is a thinking class. It does not mean it's not meant to be for a classist society kind of thing. Although some society could actually build themselves out that way, we don't want to do that. Nobody likes that, but we do have to recognize it because the different thinking classes produce different kinds of governments, and they can do it well or they can do it not so well. So we do have to recognize it so that we know that this is a phenomena. Better to know about it than to be ignorant of it. And then there are traders, those who act by trading. And traders trade things. It's what they do. They trade products, currencies, metals, animals, slaves, businesses, and so forth. They profit primarily through the arbitrage of others' work. Some examples of traders include business owners, large landlords, politicians, lawyers, and some doctors. Not all doctors, some of them. Yeah, these are your business people. They're traders. They don't actually do physical labor themselves. They find other people to do it. They look for arbitrage. They look for trading opportunities. What can they do business-wise to get by? They think in terms of business. They think in terms of trading. They don't think in terms of technical manual labor. It's a different skill set. And they're both useful skill sets. Don't want to be clear. We're not knocking any one particular thinking class. We're just recognizing them. And then thinkers, those whose profession supplies information services to laborers and traders. Some examples of thinkers include priests, teachers, healers, warriors, builders, or navigators. Now, this is from the 1900s. These examples are. There's probably other more relevant examples from today, but I haven't updated the list. These are people who think and they work with information. So I suppose an intelligence officer maybe, or people who deal in information, unless that's a trader trading information. It might be a trader type. It's a thinking class. It's going to be very mental, as in using the mental minds, using reasoning, using rightness a lot. And then the knowers. Knowers remember sense knowledge of nature and self-knowledge of their trying self through incarnation. Percival's definition. They apply this knowledge in more useful ways than the mere practicality of thinkers. So thinkers can be very practical in how they do things. And the laborers and the traders also have their tendencies to do things certain ways. The knowers, they make it their business to know things. And so they may find more innovative solutions that the more expedient and pragmatic thinking types might not find. Now, knowers do not have any specific professions of their own, but they can serve in any of the other professions. So somebody who gets by on this world just being a laborer, they might be a laborer doing a blue collar job, but if they make it their business to know everything, they're a knower. Okay, now, as a consequence of that, we have types of governments, and it's a extension of the thinking types of the people. The recognition of government types. By their thinking, the population establishes its public authority and rulership by the many, via laborers, by traders, via traders, by learning, via thinkers, and by knowledge, via knowers. So these are different broad kinds of governments recognized in Percival's work, and this is similar in other books like The Law of Nations has a similar system, which we'll get to. 1591A, government by the many. Forms of government where rulership is practiced by the many tend to result in the greatest amount of confusion, want, and unhappiness, and are the least successful forms of government. What? Isn't that democracy? Laborers. So the many tend to be of the laborer class who are often not learned in the ways of the world or of themselves. That's the problem. In their ignorance, they will curse the government with ignorance, indifference, lack of self control, and selfishness. Just look at the political chaos today. We started out as a democracy and it devolved into tyranny because this is exactly what happens when the many are establishing rulership over their society. They didn't work on themselves sufficiently, they became entitled, they don't know what they're doing, and the system wasn't designed for that eventuality, and thus it collapses. And if you think your system hasn't collapsed, I want to be clear. Our definition of a tyranny, a planetary tyranny, is a technical definition rooted in systems. The definition is the civilizational system has already failed and it is prevented from collapsing. So if that prevention wasn't there, the system would have collapsed a long time ago. Now, when the system collapses at its proper time, that's not a tyranny. But since it's kept going because they haven't learned why it's not working yet, the more it goes on, the worse it gets as they try to hold on to power, and thus it becomes more and more tyrannical. So laborers sell their labor, but they're not working on themselves. They don't know much more other than their own technical labor set. And thus, the lack of knowledge, lack of development, increase in entitlement, and so forth, these kinds of governments devolve eventually into tyranny. And the representative style of government that we know about, where it's left right politics, they actually have a known lifespan of a few hundred years. I can't remember where I got that. But if you want to build a society that you then later want to take over at some point, if you're playing the long game, you can actually use that and set up a state in a democracy that you know is going to fail in 300 years. And then you can play political games with that knowledge. I do believe some people have, but I can't remember the details. It's been a while. So then we move up, or we move on to government by traders. Forms of government where rulership is practiced by traders tend towards regulation, order, and business. But this is not sufficient to stop corruption, hypocrisy, and trading in the public affairs. Confusion, want, and unhappiness still result. So government by traders, this is your business people running the government like a business. They think in terms of business, they know buy and sell, and they know transactions, they know investment and economy, and oh, well, these things must apply to a state, right? Let's run the state like a business. Remember the first article in the Law of Nations that it's the mutual advantage of the people and they must be united. That's the whole point of a society. So societies are fundamentally public in their nature, and they have to serve everyone in the society. And the trader class tends not to get that. So both the many and the traders will trade the general interest of society for their private ends. and this causes corruption of the government. The traders will at least maintain an appearance of general order. And that's appearance, though. It doesn't necessarily mean there is actual order in substance. It just looks like there is. Plato-designed governments will tend to resemble aristocratic republics. Aristocratic republic, that means there's a subset of the population running the entire society and saying what goes. The right to command is with a subset of the population. It's not with the many. Now, government by the learned. Forms of government where rulership is practiced by the learned tend towards notions of integrity, honor, and nobility. Sounds good, right? That's because the thinkers add a function that tempers corruption. So the virtues of the thinker class temper the inherent corruption caused by the many and the traders, which stem ultimately from ignorance in their classes. Thinker-designed governments tend to resemble monarchies. So that's the catch. So this will be like a government ruled by a queen or a priestess or a priest or any other government like that. It's going to be a monarchy. And that's the catch because monarchies are great if they are founded by the founder, but over time, they too tend not to do very well because the subsequent people who act as heads of state, especially if it's a son or a daughter of the founder of a great king or queen, the sons or daughters tend not to be very good. And so over time, as generations pass, the effectiveness of the monarchy decreases. It tends to become more useless and more corrupt as well. That's why people don't like monarchies. They go back into democracies. And thus, you get the cycle between monarchy, republic, and democracy, back to tyranny, then back to monarchy, then republic, then democracy, and so forth. Now we've got the government by knowledge. So forms of government where rulership is practiced by those with knowledge tend to result in the greatest well-being and happiness among the population and are the most successful. So here we've got a complete bias for government by the knowers. Let the know-it-alls run the government. For a society to be truly successful, it must qualify its leaders to ensure they possess at a minimum sense knowledge of nature and self knowledge of their triune self. That qualifies a knower. Their leaders and sense knowledge, I'm not going to explain that, but you can go into Thinking and Destiny and learn what that is. It's related to expediency. It's also ignorant of self. That's when you're ruled by sense knowledge. Here, it's knowledge of it and nature. So it's being aware of it so as not to be ruled by it. Their leaders must also be learned in the law of nations, the ways of strong character development, how to navigate freedom of choice peacefully, and how individual actions scale to societal actions. Knowers free the government from greed, lust, and cruelty and bring justice, simplicity, honor, and consideration for others. So you want knowers in government. Regardless of the system, whether it's a monarchy, republic, or democracy, you want as many knowers in that system as possible because they're going to do the best job for you. They're going to create the best outcome for the society because they know what they're doing. Whereas the thinkers, traders, and laborers, they have less and less degrees of knowledge and thus more and more probability of acting in ignorance or selfishness or undeveloped qualities of character. Now, recognition of government systems. So we had the recognition of thinking types as classes, recognition of government types by the thinking types. Now we're combining into systems. Governmental systems generally follow a sliding scale by the number of people entrusted with the right to command, from one to all, though they may be combined and varied in any way. Lots of people make all kinds of systems for governments. It's what they do. Here is a sliding scale of what makes something what. Democratic systems are those that ensure the entire body of the nation keeps to itself the right to command. It's a direct right, to be clear. It is a direct right. If it is given up in any capacity, it is not a democracy. Representative democracies are not democracies. They are aristocratic republics. Why? Because when you elect a representative, you say that person gets to make the decisions. Therefore, they have the right to command, and you're saying, I'm giving up my right to command. Now, that transfer of right, it's not in any kind of contract or anything. There's no custom or whatever. There's no official agreement that binds the representative to act in your best interest. There is no such contract or agreement officially in place anywhere. So they get to make the decisions. They are going to decide whatever they decide. And if they be an idiot or a traitor, then that's who you're stuck with. And then you're also stuck with the consequences of those decisions. And I view that as systematically insane, bit of a lunatic design there. So it doesn't make any sense to me why anybody would want that. Well, actually, it made sense 100 years ago when there's no internet, or even a few hundred years ago when you had to send somebody to another city on the other side of the country to run the country. That made sense. But in today's world with the internet, it does not make sense. And in fact, it's useless and obsolete. Direct sovereignty. While this right is maintained, the body of the nation also keeps to itself its sovereignty. It is from this right, and only from this right, that individuals can be counted among the sovereign, as in self sovereignty. You must have the right to command over your nation, because the sovereignty is the public authority. It is the government. It is that organization or structure that allows the society to run. It is a creature of the society, and the sovereign are those who run it. So if you aren't running the sovereignty, you can't be a sovereign. So if you have the right to command, well, that literally is running the sovereignty. Therefore, you can claim to be sovereign if you have the right to command. And a true democracy extends that right to command to as many people as possible, the body of the nation. But it only works as a direct right. You cannot assign it to somebody else because you violate the right to command function. Therefore, representative democracies are not democracies. Aristocratic systems. Aristocratic systems are those that entrust a subset of the body of the nation the right to command. So it's a small group, an oligarchy, for example. Republics and representation. These are republics if they have a Senate, House of Representatives or Commons, or any other similar representative structure. Representative democracies are not democracies. They are aristocratic republics. Now, I will further say Senate, House of Representatives, or Commons, these are constructs from the Roman Empire, and what we're building in Triunia is not Roman at all. It is a completely different system built from scratch. We don't do any of this. We just don't care about it. We've seen how they work as a system. We're not impressed. We can do better, and we are doing better. Monarchic systems. Monarchies. Monarchic systems are those that entrust a single triune self with the right to command. So that's your monarchy, that's your dictatorship, sometimes it's your tyranny. So there's not much that needs to be said there. One person gets to make all of the decisions relating to the society. Now, here's a chart. Government systems and types by class. The dominant thinking class of a society determines the type of government it will have, which will be expressed in a system that keeps the right to command to the people of that class. So if you have the laborers, where you get a government type by the many, you'll get a democratic system of government. If you have mostly laborers in your country. Or said another way, it's the dominant thinking. It may not be mostly laborers by population numbers, but if their thinking style dominates the other thinking styles, even if they're a minority, then that's the function you're going to get. And we'll probably see that more with the trader types. So those who think as traders build government types by traders, and they tend to form republics. And these are a subset of the population. So their thinking style, it's different from the laborers, and there are not as many traders as there are laborers, but they are more dominant in the society. Therefore, they get their way, and they build republics. The thinkers are government types by the learned. people with some knowledge and thinking abilities, and they'll tend to build monarchies. And that will include kingdoms, churches, dictatorships, other kinds of things like that. There's like one person who has some knowledge, more knowledge than everybody else, and that one person, their thinking style is dominant in the society. And so everything in the society is in service to that. And for that society, that works. And then we have the knowers who build government types by knowledge, and they can build any of the above government systems. Now, it's a recognition of a general trend. Of course, there's any number of exceptions possible. It's like that with the law of thought. We can state generalities, but there's always an exception somewhere. There's just so many things that combine with each other in nature that the combination, and there's also paradoxes involved. I don't think we've gotten into that here, but when you're dealing with the law of thought at advanced levels, you are dealing with paradoxes. It's always possible for there to be exceptions. And what we do in Triunia is a balance of these systems. It's a democratic system. It does have its authoritarian capabilities, though. It's a balance. We take the opposing polarities, we solve a paradox with them, we go up a level in our thinking, which then lets us build better policy. And we also built a better system with that as well. So it's not so much a let's do this one thing and we'll just do that and only that. No, we take a thing and its opposite, min-max them and optimize them for their best possible use, and we make sure they're each playing to their strengths. We don't fight, we work together. And that lets us build a better society. And that's how our system developed and evolved. You'll see that later. I guess the Triune Democracy Codex will be that. But you can always go and look at our material on our website, and it will show you our informal design docs. Okay. Basis of society. This is very important. This shows you the construction of a society. 1510.1. The sovereign state. Every politically functional state must have a sovereignty, the system by which the state works and is also known as the government or public authority. A united people, the sovereign, who own the sovereignty and are truly free. That's these guys over here on the left. And the sovereignty, the government, is the middle purple box inside the state. The sovereign, who are free, are above the state. Rules for thee and not for me, right? Yeah, there's an actual system function for why that is. It's how it works. It's how societies work. A united population, the citizens, who are the developing subjects that do the work. And so that's the purple box on the right, also inside the state. And the citizens or subjects are under the sovereignty. They are born on the land there, and then they get brought up into the society and serve it. And the functional state must also have a united society, the sovereign and the citizens united together in the common aim of the state. So in a properly functional state, everybody here is unified together in one big aim. They're all working together. Where you go one, you go all. It's been floating around the internet for a bit now. That describes that, but also in international law and the law of nations, the nation is interpreted as one entity. And so all of these people in international law, they all go together as one. And if there's a consequence brought on one group, it's going to be brought on the other groups. If there's a consequence brought on the sovereigns of the state, it's also going to be brought to bear on the citizens, and vice versa. What makes somebody sovereign? The right to command. And here is another look at that. There's a distinction between those who are sovereign and those who are in the state as citizens and so forth. You cannot be both. There's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. It's an oxymoron. It doesn't work. It's not how societies work. You have to have a right to command over the society, and that right to command will be implemented by a system that supports it. And so the people claiming that they're over here on the left, when in fact they're not, yeah, they don't know what they're doing. The other thing about sovereignty in a state is it's backed by force. The state always has the ability to go to war to defend itself. That's what makes sovereign sovereign. And that's also why international law works through honor. in order to maintain peace. That's why honor is so important. That's why character development is so important because it maintains peace. The convention for a while has been that the actions of the sovereignty are separate from the actions of the citizens. And so there could be a dispute amongst countries and they can hate the sovereignty of each other, but then they don't blame the people. But actually, it's all part of one system. International law recognizes it all as one. And so that's a convention that has no merit, not really. And so there's a very important point here to bring, which is collusion. They're all working together as one. We can say they are colluding with each other. And that's a function of how states work. You might know it more commonly as patriotism, and there's other ways as well. Patriotism, paying taxes, giving your labor to the state. If you're doing any of those things, you're colluding with the state. By virtue of the unity described in 1510.1.4, the sovereign state, a united society, the sovereign and the citizens conspire and collude with each other to forward the aims of their state. And this is an important recognition. This recognition is important because citizens do not always act with explicit contracts in place, and they are not likely to understand the nuance involved here. Citizens consent to their situation by their actions. If they pay their taxes, they collude with their sovereignty. If they do what their sovereignty tells them to do, they are colluding with it. If they trespass upon their sovereignty, but their sovereignty allows it, then their sovereignty colludes with them. And so everybody's working together, one way or another, towards the aims of the state. Sometimes that working together is great. Sometimes it is actually conspiratorial in its nature and not so great. But here's the problem. So citizens are not innocent. We don't recognize innocent civilians here. When the sovereignty acts in immoral and dishonorable ways, the citizenry supports it via collusion through their taxes and labors. That's why we don't recognize it, because we recognize the collusion inherent in the operation of the state. Thus, the citizenry cannot be deemed innocent, nor do they have any right to immunity. They are contributing, they are supporting the dishonorable behavior. Therefore, they themselves are acting with dishonor and immorality. Under the law of nations, the entire state is one entity, and both the sovereignty and the citizenry can be held accountable for their actions together as one. And if you play any kind of real-time strategy game, you know to go for the workers. That's how you cripple your opponent's military. Strategy, it just makes sense. And that can be done in various ways. But we do recognize that. And we have to recognize that because we can't hinder or handicap ourselves based on an ideal. That doesn't work. This is a result of the law, and it has to be recognized here in case Triunia ever gets into a war, or your society, if you adopt this, ever gets into a war, you have to know what's legit. And this also puts pressure on the citizens not to support their governments when their governments start behaving immorally and dishonorably and tyrannical to themselves, because that will have consequences for them if they allow it. And this gets back into tacit consent. If the citizens do nothing, they continue supporting it, they are actually agreeing with the bad behavior of their government. They want it. So they get the government they deserve, they get the reality they deserve. And under the law of thought, the entire state is one thought, and both the sovereignty and the citizenry will balance their development according to that thought's exteriorizations. And this is also very important because, okay, so they're all acting together as one, supporting immoral behavior. They're all going to experience the karma or balancing factor of that immoral behavior. The universe will balance it so that they can learn what to do and what not to do, that whatever the dishonorable conduct is there, so that they can learn morality and honor, so that they can scale, so that they can enter the realm of permanence one day. It's all necessary and part of their evolution. So this part here is extremely important because this is probably the first time in the Genesis Codex that we've actually brought both the law of nations and the law of thought together to bear on one concept. So when you have two laws like that operating together, the conclusion is extremely strong. That's a force there to be reckoned with. And if you're paying attention, you might notice Triunia is also a thought, and that's correct. That also means Triunia, when its citizens and people and sovereignty work together and collude with each other and conspire and so forth, they too will experience the thought's exteriorizations, whatever that may be. So we in Triunia also have to be conscious of this and navigate ourselves through reality so that the exteriorizations aren't bad and catastrophic, because they will happen. But if we're conscious of it, we're already halfway there. We know. And as long as we maintain morality and honor and respect, it won't be a problem for us. There's nothing for us to learn. We've already learned it. Okay, law. A law is a rule for a reality. A law is a prescription for the performance of units in a reality. It is a rule that determines how the reality functions for those inside it. A law is a rule for a reality, and it's a prescription for performance. This prescription for performance language comes from Percival. I think I paraphrased this statement here, these words here, but ultimately it's Percival's definition. Understand the context. Wherever there is a law, there is a reality context to it. When faced with a law, ask what is the reality supporting it. Now, prescription for performance is Percival, but reality context and rule for a reality, that's my own observation. And so these are together here. Realities defined by rules. Realities are defined by rules. So it's a rule if you're on the outside of the reality. That's covered later. Laws on the inside. For those inside the reality, its rules are immutable laws. They cannot be changed from the inside. That's what a law is. But the rules on the outside. For those outside the reality, a rule is merely a rule and can be changed as desired by those with the ability to do so. Let's go back up here to our society diagram. We have a state, the yellow box. That state is a reality for the people inside it. The citizens who are inside the reality cannot change its laws. The laws are immutable for the citizens. The sovereignty is just a system that operates the state. It can't actually change the laws either. The sovereign who are outside the reality, well, those laws are just rules. They can change the rules however they want. And when they change the rules, for everybody inside the state changes. That's law, a rule for a reality. And so this is why, what reality are you in where that is a law? Is it really the reality that you want? And we're in an age, we're entering an age, if we're not already in it, where you can choose your own reality. At the country level, that means you can pick whichever country you want to be in if you don't like where you're at. Reality description. Realities can be described by discovering and listing its laws or rules. These laws or rules are merely descriptions of them and are not the actual laws nor rules themselves. The actual laws or rules will have some kind of tangible effect when they are altered. This point is in here to clue you guys in to math. Yes, math, as in 1 + 1 = 2. Math is a description of reality. It tracks reality very closely and thus is very effective, but it's not the actual rules of the reality. It's just a description of it. And so you can think outside the box with this understanding, and that's why it's here. So that we're not trapped into the box described by math. Maybe there are better ways. I don't know, but maybe there could be. But I want to open up the possibility so that somebody out there one day wants to think about that, they can. Prescription for performance. Now this is Percival's quote. A law is a prescription for performance, made by the thoughts and acts of its maker or makers, and to which those who have subscribed are bound. So if you're outside the reality and you make a law, it's a prescription for performance. The thought is the state, and if you're outside of it, you're the sovereign of it, you are the maker. Everybody who subscribes to it, who's attached to that thought, who is a citizen, they are bound to perform according to the rules that you prescribed, the laws. But it doesn't end there. Attachments are law. Whenever a triune self attaches to a thought, the attachment becomes a law unto the triune self. And it's going to be the law until detachment. The law will remain in effect until the triune self has learned from and balanced the thought, at which point it will detach from it. So if you start believing something so much that you attach to the thought, that belief becomes your law. As the triune self, you're on the intelligent side, but your body's on the physical side in nature. And the thought exists also on the intelligent side, but it also exteriorizes in nature. So if the intelligent side is outside of nature, then the exteriorizations and the physicality are inside nature, inside the reality. And the intelligent side is outside reality. So when you attach to a thought, you set a rule as outside the reality and occurs in the mental atmospheres. But that rule becomes law as the thought exteriorizes. And so you get what you want. You get what you were thinking about, but not quite, because you also get its balancing factor. You get its opposite so that you can learn. And so law proceeds to destiny. By virtue of 1411, the law of thought, the attachment as law carries the triune self to its destiny. Here's a warning to beware of unwanted destinies. Use this power very carefully. Not all destinies are desired or necessary. Having many attachments and thus many laws and destinies can consume a life and enslave a triune self to their mind and to nature. Avoid unnecessary attachments for greater freedom. Because the definition of free will is having the ability to attach or not to attach to a thing. But if you set up your life with many attachments, you deny yourself that ability, and therefore you're a slave to everything that happens in nature. So you're a slave to nature itself. Some people do this, but it's actually an immature form of development. It's still an advanced form of development, but immature compared to somebody who knows this. The other thing to recognize is, so attachments are law. And the laws, this is a universal law. If we're running a state, a country, the sovereignty, we can make statutory laws, okay, and maybe some of them will be immutable over the lifetime of the state. But ultimately, that state still recognizes the supremacy of universal law. And therefore, these attachment laws are going to take precedence over statutory laws. And so it might be that the attachment exteriorizes in a way that conflicts with the statutory laws of the state. What does that mean? I don't know, but we have to recognize it so that we can figure out what to do when that happens, or how we can channel the thought to exteriorize in a way that is safe for the society. And I think I covered something similar to this earlier in the Codex. You can't prevent desires, they have to occur. It's just a matter of what's the best way to do it. Because suppression is not healthy. So the authority for law, knowing that we have authority for law. Per 1511 2a, attachments are law. The triune self's own self-knowledge is the authority for the attached law. So it's based on what you know. If you know better, good for you. If you don't know better, something's going to happen. You're going to face your destiny. By virtue of 1542a, exteriorizations have a context. Self-knowledge is part of the knowledge set the triune self has about itself at the moment of attachment. Comparisons to what others would do in a similar situation are irrelevant. Triunia does everything very differently from everybody else. If we were doing the same thing, we wouldn't be solving any problems. So we don't care about what someone else would do at the moment of an exteriorization. We recognize the context. And so what somebody does in situation A, the same situation, but person B, it might have a different outcome for that person. And we're okay with that. It all depends. It depends on the context. And so when you're dealing with an exteriorization that results from an attachment to a thought, the ultimate authority for that exteriorization is the attachment. It is the thought itself, not statutory law, not the state law. It's the thought and the attachment itself that is the authority there. And the state has to yield to that. And so I say that, and then we let the society and the people figure out what does that mean. Now here's why we allow it. Conscience overrides legality. The rightness mind, the all-powerful rightness mind, shall not be denied. By virtue of 1 for 1, the law of thought, 132, a triune self, and 133, self-government from within. And whereas conscience is a message from the rightness mind to the feeling mind, backed by the knowledge set of the triune self, whenever conscience speaks, it immediately makes the triune self responsible for its actions. The conscience can be thought of as the subset of the triune self knowledge set consisting entirely of what not to do. That's just some set language there to help people understand it. We like to be logical. The conscience takes precedence over what's legal. Why? Because it's universal law. That's why. And the conscience, because it knows what's right, it's the little game, right? That's the game of morality. You win that game, you get to go to the realm of permanence. We all want to go there, and we want our society to go there. So we recognize the supremacy of conscience. And that means that, as a consequence of that, the laws of the land are irrelevant. Conscience has no consideration for the laws of the land, for statutory laws, for the laws of the state. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about common law or anything else, or civil law. Whatever they may be at that or any other time, whenever there is a conflict, the legal rule shall be held in doubt and reevaluated or voided. And that's our policy in Triunnia. If conscience is speaking and it conflicts with the state, there might be a problem with the state's design that needs a fix. Moral guide. Conscience is a moral concern that points to the only possible way to scale behavior peacefully and facilitate evolution towards the realm of permanence. Its signal can indicate development issues in the triune self and design issues in the society. So it's in our best interest to honor conscience, to honor the rightness mind. Tech abuse. To prevent people from abusing appeals to conscience, we have to verify that the triune self is acting in a manner consistent with self-respect, morality, and honor. So is their conscience actually working, and is it actually telling them that the thing is wrong? That has to be verified. Otherwise, it's just somebody saying a thing. Now here's the consequence. The triune self is liable. When the conscience speaks, the triune self becomes liable for ignoring their conscience. And that means they take the liability of ignoring it. It means they're responsible for ignoring it. It means that when it balances and it's going to be a negative consequence, they're going to pay it. They're going to experience it. And it probably won't be desired. Probably won't even be a good thing. Triune selves are liable for ignoring their conscience. That's the way of the universe, and you don't want to be in that position, so don't ignore your conscience. And to help you along, it's best to be in a state that respects conscience, such as here, state overrule is unlawful. Should the state attempt to overrule a valid conscience warning, the state shall be held liable. I believe I've already said enough thus far to make that obvious, that the universal law backing conscience takes supremacy over the state. Thus, it's the state's fault if it overrules conscience. Now, here's a big warning. Perdition. Laws that overrule a triune self's conscience and force it to act against its internal compass make the triune self a victim of perdition and are a serious crime, because it will damage their thinking ability and cause psychological trauma. And that hurts the growth of the triune self, which hurts their evolution and chances to advance to the realm of permanence. It's a crime. It's a big crime in Triunnia that we recognize. We are going to have an entire codex, the Perdition Codex, built for this specific situation. That's how important it is. And the thing about a planetary tyranny, the world today completely losing its mind, this is why. It's run by perdition all over the place. They don't know what they're doing. Entering and exiting realities. Remember, a law is a rule for a reality. There are, of course, realities in that function. Every triune self has the ability to enter and exit realities, attaching and detaching from a thought. Every triune self has the ability to attach to and detach from a thought. This is just additional recognition to point out that even if you can't change a reality or change your situation, even if you have no power to change what's happening in the world around you, you always have the ability to change your environment. You can pack up your things and leave and go somewhere else. You can exit one reality and enter another, exit one society, enter another, immigrate, emigrate. You have those choices. Even if you don't really have the choice in how things run in your country, you can always choose another one. And so that's an ability you have, and it's an ability you'll always have. It's actually universal law. The other reason I want to make you aware of that is it doesn't just extend to like reality, any reality you can think of. You can always step out and step backwards of it mentally in your mind. And when I say that, I mean very deep depths of your mind worth exploring. To do that, you can enter and exit. Entering this reality is done through incarnation, for example. Exiting is done through death or excarnation. Active thinking, as described in Percival's system, is done through entering a thought by holding focus over it very, very clearly. And then, of course, you can exit out of that at some point later. And so these are abilities you have, the ability to enter and exit. And there's a bunch of different ways you can do that. And so these are here so that you know about them. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you found it interesting and inspiring. There is a solution to tyranny. This is it. Your best thinking brought you here. The system's purpose is what it does. It's time for better thinking and a better system. In this video, we looked at how the Genesis Codex recognizes classes by thinking type, types of governments as determined by the dominant thinking type in a society, the basis of a society, which is how they work in the first place, and our recognition of what laws actually are as rules for reality in which one is, which can also be described as a prescription for performance. The next video will focus on dangers that we need to be aware of for the next era. It should be available in a week or two, but subscribe to be notified because there is no regular posting schedule. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.